You are listening to the Hike Files podcast. I'm your host, Kurt Zitzelman. What's going on? Welcome to episode 5. Have you ever hallucinated while you're camping? And I don't mean you went out and you found some mushrooms and you started hallucinating. I mean, have you ever fallen asleep and woke up thinking you heard someone talking to you, or you heard sounds, a phone ringing, you saw lights, something like that? Might not be what you think. You might not actually have experienced it. It could be a hypnagogic hallucination. And that's what I'm going to talk about in this episode. And I'm going to try really hard to do this without saying because I edit a lot of those out and I'm really tired of doing it. So I'm going to really try hard not to do it. Hypnagogic state or hypnagogic illusions are a phenomenon that happens as you are going from wakefulness to sleep. There's the counter side of that, which is hypnopompic state, which is what happens as you're transitioning from sleep to wakefulness. I experience both, so for me, it's hard to tell one from the other. So I just call them all hypnagogic events for me. These can include things like visual, auditory hallucinations. You might feel like you're falling or moving. You may hear your name called. You could hear doorbells, phone ringing. You might think there's someone standing next to you. All kinds of things. For me, I get that plus a couple other things. This could also lead into lucid dreaming, which is what happened for me. When this first started happening to me, I thought I was experiencing sleep paralysis, and I was getting upset with it. I was getting upset waking up paralyzed. So I spent months with this happening, fighting through that paralysis, starting to move around my apartment, trying to manipulate things in my apartment. And then eventually I wound up using my phone to call a friend, letting them know in advance, of course, that they might get this very weird phone call from me. And then when I woke up in the morning, I had made the call, left a voicemail. When I woke up in the morning, there was no outbound call on my phone, and they never got the voicemail. That's when I started to put two and two together, realizing that, this isn't actually happening to me. And I was able to start to turn it into very realistic lucid dreams where you can actually take control of the dream. You know you're dreaming, but you can control it. And I could fly and I could do all these cool things in my dreams. That happens more when I'm at home, but when I'm camping, I think I'm in such a relaxed state that a whole other slew of things will happen. I have thought I've seen elephants walk past my hammock. I have heard people come into camp and set up right next to me and wake up in the morning and there's nobody there. And you know what that sound is. You know how that sounds. So when you hear that and you're kind of laying in your hammock and you hear someone set up next to you, you're like, oh, come on, really? You're going to set up right next to me? Of course, it's late, so all right, whatever. But then there's nobody there. Some of these experiences really stand out, and I remember them vividly, and I'm going to talk about those. The first one was I was doing a backpacking trip with Dragon Roams and my buddy Rocco. We were on the old loggers path, or a portion of it. We were just out there scouting. And I woke up to go use the restroom, a tree. I walked out away from camp, was looking at the stars. The sky was clear. It was really nice. Came back to the hammock, got in, got relaxed, started to fall asleep. And to my perception, someone leaned into my hammock. It sounded like a female voice and simply said, "Hi," right in my face. As you can imagine, that woke me right up. And I'm looking around. I didn't have my bug net on, so I'm looking around. I turn my headlight on. I'm looking around. There's nobody around. And then it dawned on me that anyone who would have approached the hammock, I would have heard we were in the woods. We weren't in a cleared spot, so there was leaves and twigs. It was kind of rocky and uneven ground, so no one was making a straight line to anything there. And I never heard them run away. And I realized, oh, this is just that hypnagogic state. When I was on the Thunder Swamp Trail just last year, or was that last year? Early this year. I was at this nice campsite right by a creek. I fell asleep. And I had two events happen. One was I woke up and heard someone on the other side of the creek start laughing, like maniacal, kind of laughing. And I sat there for a second, I listened to it, and you get that rush of adrenaline, like, oh, something weird is about ready to happen. And then I heard another person, and another person, and then more people, and more people. And it sounded like maybe 100 people standing on the bank of the creek on the other side of the bridge from me, just laughing at me. And all of a sudden, it took a second, and I realized this isn't real. This is a hypnagogic state. And I was able to wake myself up. And, of course, there was nobody across the creek laughing at me. So I went back to sleep. And I don't know, we'll say maybe an hour later, I woke up and looked off to my right, and there was a little bit of a clearing out there. There's like a swamp, maybe a quarter mile, a third of a mile away from camp. And so it's kind of open over there. And I looked over, and I could see this. It looked like a helicopter hovering there with just all red lights on it, and they were blinking in sequence. And I'm looking at it, and I was like, what am I looking at, right? Like, what is going on? Like, I don't hear a helicopter. What am I seeing? What's going on? And then it dawned on me that, wait a second, I'm using my hammock with the winter cover on it, and I've got my tarp up. There's no way I could see over there. So I'm not seeing anything over there. And then I woke up and realized, oh, no, that was just a hypnagogic state. Things like that will freak me right out, because that's a weird situation. Someone walking up and saying hi, although weird, isn't as ominous as seeing weird lights flying over you or hearing people laughing behind you. I've also, on occasion, thought I'd wake up and I'd be kind of, well, you're kind of in a hammock. Sometimes you're kind of naturally paralyzed because the hammock wants to close in on you a little bit. And woke up and thought there was an animal outside of the hammock, which I have had happen. But I thought it was trying to attack me. So I'm trying to call out to my friends. And the only thing that was coming out of my mouth was because I was sound asleep. And in the morning when I woke up and I'm like, hey, did you hear me like call out to you? Because I knew by the time I woke up that was a hypnagogic state, but I didn't know if it was actually, I was making the connection to be able to yell out. And it was Dragon. And he says, well, I heard you mumbling. And that was about it. So I went back to sleep. And I'm thinking, thanks, man. I thought I was getting attacked by a bear. And you went back to sleep. So it can be really unnerving. And if you don't know what's happening, I mean, some of those situations would be scary enough to just flee the woods and never go back. So if you experience things like that, if you think you hear voices or think you hear your name called or see lights, it may not actually be that. It may be hypnagogia or hypnopompia. And it can be kind of terrifying. Absolutely. I was testing a hammock here in the shop and woke up to the sound. Now, I have a Ring doorbell. So when you ring the doorbell, it makes a sound. It makes the chime at the doorbell. I've got an interior camera that chimes at, and then it chimes at my phone. So you hear it 3 times, and there's a little delay between each. So you hear like the doorbell, the camera, the phone. And I'm laying in the hammock, and I hear the doorbell, and I hear somebody pounding on the door and calling in. And I wake up, and who is banging on my door? Who is this? And I can't get out of the hammock. I'm trying to get out of the hammock. I can't get spun around to get out of the hammock. And finally, I kind of flop out of the hammock and I'm laying on the floor, and I hear him down there banging on the door. And I realize something's not right. It's too, like, the light's wrong in the room. It's kind of hard to explain, but as the lighting is wrong in here. And then I realize that, I'm not awake. This isn't real. And then I open my eyes and I'm still laying in the hammock. It's really weird. It happens a lot when I'm in the hammock. To me, this state can seem ultra realistic. And I can kind of stop when it's happening and kind of take stock of the air. I know this sounds weird. I kind of stop and I feel what the air feels like, if that makes any sense. And it just feels a little off. Now, I can't just wake up. I can't just go, okay, wake up. Kind of startle myself awake. So what I've done is I can kind of build up like an anxious, nervous energy, like right in the core of the body, and kind of release it. I don't know how to explain it, but it's not something I can do when I'm awake. I can't like generate this feeling when I'm awake, but I can in that state. So usually, like when I heard like the laughing in the hammock, or I saw the light, that's when I generate this kind of burst of anxious energy, and I feel it in that state, and then it takes a few seconds, and then I wake up. So it's like it's kind of like poking myself awake from inside a dream. Really bizarre. So I would suggest if you have experienced anything like that, definitely look into it. Talk to an expert, talk to a doctor, and make sure it's nothing serious. Now, for me, I think it's just overactive imagination, but it can be brought on by things like alcohol or drug use, insomnia, stress and anxiety, narcolepsy, bipolar disorder, or depression. So there are some things that can cause it. So if you are experiencing this and you think you may be at risk because of one of these factors, definitely go talk to a doctor and get yourself checked out. But it may just be you're one of the 70% that actually remember it. One of the interesting things here, and I read this on this website from healthline.com, and I'll put the link in here, is they call it the Tetris effect. And I'd never heard of this before, but I have experienced it. And it's when, have you ever played a game? Have you ever been playing, and this is where it comes from Tetris. Have you ever played a game that's very repetitive like that? And as you're falling asleep, you see you're kind of playing the game like with your mind. Like in your mind, you're playing that. You can see the pieces dropping or whatever it is, the game you're playing, and you actually can control it. It's like you're stuck in that game mode, but you don't have the game in your hand. I've actually had that happen. It's kind of weird. You'd think it would be enjoyable. You're playing a game, but it's not that fun of an experience, to be honest with you. One of the things I did read here that I think is fascinating is they're talking about the possibility of inducing hypnagogia, like if you wanted to experience it. And I'll just read this one part here. It says, some of the world's smartest minds use hypnagogia to tap into their creativity. Thomas Edison, Edgar Allan Poe, and Salvador Dali used to nap with a steel ball in their hands so that they would wake up when the ball hit the floor. I'm not sure how that induces hypnagogia, but since it is at that state of falling asleep, I guess as soon as you got relaxed enough and you dropped the ball, you could induce just that effect, and maybe it would carry over to your waking mind for a little time, and you would get some creativity out of it. So apparently also researchers at MIT Media Lab had developed a way to do this with a device they called Dormio, and it tracks when you would be hypnagogic, and then it uses audio stimuli to keep you from falling into a deeper sleep. So it would keep you in that hypnagogic state. That I don't know about. I have to look into that and see if that would work. That might be kind of cool, as long as it wasn't some crazy hypnagogic state. Just at home, occasionally it'll happen, And I've heard people coming up my steps. I've heard people talking to me. I've never had like what do they call it? Like the old hag syndrome, where it felt like somebody was holding me down, or like I haven't seen anybody in my room. I haven't felt a presence in the room during this state, but I could see how it could happen. Absolutely. So a little different tangent there for this episode, talking about the hypnagogia, but it does happen a lot when I'm camping. And I could absolutely understand how, if that happened to someone and they weren't aware that that's what it was, it might keep you from going outside ever again. I mean, imagine not knowing that happened to me, and then waking up and thinking I'm hearing 100 people in the woods, on the other side of a creek, and I got nowhere to go, laughing at me. Like, that would, if I didn't know that I suffered from that would have creeped me right out. And I'm sure I'm forgetting instances that's happened. And I've been sitting here trying to rack my brains, like, what are some other times it's happened? But yeah, needless to say, it can be very creepy. So yeah, understand that if this does happen to you, it may not be the actual thing that's happening to you that you think is happening to you. It may be this hypnagogic state. So piggybacking onto that, into the hammock part and waking up to strange things. I did mention that I thought I had a bear or an animal trying to attack me in the hammock, and it was just that hypnagogic state. I have, in reality, had a bear walk right up to me in my hammock. Last year, I was at Francis Slocum State Park. I was testing the Adventure Hammock Systems, what do they call it, the car mount, basic hammock, bare bones mount, I think. And it hooks into your receiver for your trailer hitch. And it's got 2 arms on it. You can hang your hammock from it and sleep from your car. So I figured state park, awesome place to test this out. Got the hammock set up, did my normal thing, had my dinner, took a little walk at night, came back, got in the hammock, and really woke up because I heard somebody walking down the street, and I know I was awake. This wasn't that hypnagogic state. I could feel the difference, and heard something walking up the park road and then kind of veer off the road and come up along the Jeep, and I could hear it sniffing and kind of grunting, and it got closer and it got closer, and I was laying there and I was kind of awake, and I was just like, am I hearing, is that somebody's dog? And then it stuck its head between the Jeep and my tarp and nosed right into my shoulder and took a big sniff, and that woke me up. This bear just kind of, and then touching my shoulder with his nose, and I just kind of turned my head and I was like, whoa, and I heard him back up and just amble off into the woods, and I hopped out of the hammock and I got my light on, and I'm looking, just making sure there's no more bears, because it was a state park, but a lot of people around, and bears are more apt to approach you in a spot that's more populated. They get used to the people. Now, having said that, just in the past week or so, I believe it is, in Colorado, a guy was in his hammock. It was around 10 p.m. He heard some rustling outside his hammock. He turned on his light. There was a bear right next to him, and the story is he got bit by a bear, and then the bear left. And so this guy left. He went to a hotel. He washed up, went to the hospital, and now they're looking for that bear. But this was from what I can tell in the report, was a very popular campground. People there. And the problem is, you don't know what the people before you have done at that campsite. They could have been making steaks on the fire and just left the grease in the fire pit, and the animal's going to come in. So I don't know exactly what happened. There's not a lot of information as to if the bear got panicked and bit him, or if the guy, he panicked and he went to kind of push the bear away and just kind of stuck his arm in the bear's mouth. I guess that's a possibility too. So that's not really clear as what happened. But the problem is when people and animals share the same space, and then people want to feed the bear, feed the animal, leave food there for them, because apparently in some people's minds, wildlife can't survive without human intervention. Leave the wildlife alone. I think that's becoming a theme. Every week I hear a story about something like this. And it's not this guy's fault. I mean, he stated, I had no food in camp. I had no garbage in camp. I had no food on me. I cleaned up. Everything was clean. I woke up. The bear was just there. So it's not necessarily that he did anything wrong. But because people like to leave garbage around, the bear may have found fare. The bear may have found food in that campsite previously and came back to see if there was more. Now this guy seems to be okay. The bite marks weren't really bad, but it could have been really bad. And now that bear is going to be, they're going to track that bear down and they're going to have to euthanize it because it attacked a human and now it's considered a dangerous bear. The bear may have just been going somewhere where it thought there was food. It got caught in a bad situation. You don't know. Now, could the bear have been aggressive and just gone after the guy because he was there? It's possible, but it's rare. So, and I know I've spoken about this before. When I'm backpacking, I feel more comfortable with animals being around than if I'm in an established campground, just for that reason. Because I don't know what the people that were there before have done. I don't know if they left food behind. I mean, I see it backpacking. You'll come across, it just happened when I was on the Black Forest Trail. It's happened at the Pinchot Trail a couple times. It's happened on a lot of trips. It happened when I was on the Quijana Trail. Stuff left behind in campsites. From just a vest on the Quijana Trail to, a burnt tent, a ripped open bag, half of, a sleeping bag. On the Pinchot Trail, it was like I forget what was it. It was like a chair and a blanket, and I think there was like a bottle of water, like a jug of water and something else there. Like, this is stuff that animals are going to come investigate. And if you keep on leaving it there in the same spot, which in the case of the Pinchot Trail, I've seen stuff in that campsite 2 or 3 times because it's really close to the parking lot. So people go out there, they have a bad night, and they just grab their stuff and they leave. So these are things that lead to encounters with bears and other animals. Now, this in Colorado, it was a black bear. It wasn't a grizzly bear. So the guy was lucky in that sense because black bears are way less aggressive than a grizzly. Not saying that they can't attack, but they're less likely to. So if that was a grizzly, it could have been a completely different story. So please, if you're out, especially if you're in a shared campground, like a public campground, a state park or KOA or something like that, don't leave your garbage around. Don't leave food around. Don't dump your bacon grease, off the side of the camp. Clean up. Make sure it's clean because the next people that are there, they might be the ones who actually wind up paying the price for you leaving your garbage behind. So now I'm pretty sure that anybody who listens to this podcast, you don't do things like that, but share that message. That's going to do it for this week. Thanks for listening. I've got the website. I had the website up and I changed hosts because I was running into the same problem I was having with the Primitive Intelligence podcast page where the host is just horrible. So I changed hosts. That's all in the process of moving over right now. Looks like today the domain's transferred, so it's going to take a while for everything to go through the system. But I'm going to plan on doing some cool stuff on the website, so you can check that out. If you're watching this on YouTube and you'd rather listen to it, you can search for it on YouTube Music, or if you have Spotify, the podcast is on Spotify. It's in Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, and there's also the RSS feed that you can just download and put in your podcast player and listen to it however you like. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Talk to you in the next one.